Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today is my full review and discussion of the WE Knives Thug XL. Design collaboration with Christensen Knife Works. You can see the maker's mark right here. And while we're here, take a look at that blade. That is absolutely spectacular. Very, very nicely done. So I want to start by pointing out, this knife is one of those knives. My initial impressions of this was to be very, very impressed, and I still am. This is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous knife. That has not changed. But I do want to add an element to that discussion that I only kind of brought up briefly, and that is to say that WE Knives does a great job of building of their design collaborations. They've done a number of these. Some of the ones that stand out to me, from WE Knives' own sort of collection. There's the WE Knives Malice, which was based off, it's just Ferrum Forge inspired. They also do the Archbishop 2.0, now 3.0. Do you remember all the way back to the Boost Blade Smoke and how great that was? And so, over the years, when they're able to get together with a designer and do something like this, they tend to really, really knock it out of the park. And this one is no exception. I guess the difference might be the details on this are really, really worth noticing. So I already showed off this blade. Whoops. I'll show it off again. I love the satin blade version of this knife. There is a blade that matches the rubbed finish on the handle, and that's pretty good. But this satin, it's so striking. And the transitions between the grinds, we've got this beautiful hollow grind on the straight edge here. The tanto, sort of a traditional tanto, is a flat grind, which does give a little extra strength out toward the tip. And then we've got this top swedge, all of which are clean. Look at the clean, crisp lines. We've got alternating directions of grind lines there, which again just add to how gorgeous this looks. So we're only on the blade, guys, and the details here are so, so nice. Now, before we leave the blade, I want to comment a little bit on the performance of this knife because it is great. The hollow grind here leaves it very thin behind the edge and means, when you're cutting something, it slices so, so nicely. I've said this before, I'll say it again. This is, it's not popular necessarily in the knife world. Nut and Fancy loves to talk about FFG, right? Full flat grind. But for me, I'll take a hollow grind every day of the week. One, I think for an EDC knife, it gives you that option of having a little more thickness, a little more strength on your blade in case you want to do something that, you wouldn't want to be doing with a kitchen knife. You need something a little heftier. But then you still get the same slicing power. And in fact, the neat thing about a hollow grind is as it moves through material, the hollow, actually the material ends up doing this. It doesn't go directly, it doesn't follow the blade. It actually creates a bit of a bubble in there, which ends up having then less friction with the material you're cutting. So it ends up slicing even better than a full flat grind, even though full flat grind is sort of the standard thing that everyone loves to talk about. As we move away from the blade, by the way, the blade is 3.5 inches. I'm not going to get into specs as much in this because, I've already covered that and a quick Google search will tell you. Okay, but it's like 8 inches, 3.5 inch blade. Moving to the handle, look at the finish on this titanium. Again, it's so, so detailed and beautiful. We've got this bronze anodized, sorry, I keep hitting the tripod. We've got this bronze anodized pivot collar matching on the show side. There is a version, by the way, and here's, if I do have a complaint about this, it's fairly minor, but it would have been cool to see this handle full titanium, but still retain the satin blade, and that's not a variation that's available here. But that, I think, would have been a cool option. As it stands, to me, this is by far the most attractive option, although, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So I know there are some guys out there who, and I watched a couple of reviews and have heard some guys online talk about how they just love this finish and absolutely wanted the one that has it carried over to the blade. All right, Moving over to the show side, we have this gorgeous carbon fiber. Really well done. And by the way, this is a complaint that I have. A lot of times, even on higher end knives, you get carbon fiber that has voids in it. That is really, really frustrating. I just don't see an excuse for that. So I kind of wish that would go away. And here, the carbon fiber here is just basically perfect. Like there's nothing that I can see that, diminishes from it really at all. We've got a titanium backspacer carrying over with that same rubbed directional finish, which looks absolutely fantastic. Okay. This is going to be a little lighter than some of the other full titanium versions of the knife. There's a little lanyard connector there as well. So we've talked about some of the cool details on this and some of the things that are worth noticing in terms of just the looks, but I have to add that this handle is a little small, okay? We kind of established that earlier, that this is a little on the smaller end of the spectrum for what I like. However, the ergonomics, it sort of just lands, in a saber grip anyway, it lands just perfectly in my size large hand. Switching to a hammer grip is not quite as comfortable, mostly because of the finger choil here. It ends up sort of, I feel like I need to go to that saber grip to get it really comfortable in hand, but not bad. The other thing I like here is just an attention to detail. I've got, in a saber grip, your thumb sort of lands here behind the thumb stud, and I've got a nice sort of landing pad there for my thumb, which is great. We've got a little bit of a choil here for sharpening, and the lock, the thumb stud does get into the cutting path just a little depending on how you're doing that, but this is never something that I've noticed to be a problem. Now, the lock is very easy to access. I love how the pivot collar serves as an over travel stop here, and then the deployment is absolutely fantastic. So what have I learned over a little bit of time carrying this and using it? I've only learned to love it more. This is really, really great. It looks amazing. It feels good in hand, especially in a saber grip. The blade grind is geared toward performance, and it also happens to look fantastic. Okay. So yeah, I have no major complaints about this knife other than the color variations that are available and the fact that the ergonomics could be a little better in a hammer grip, although I rarely find myself using a hammer grip. All right. Everything else is very, very good. I do want to comment just briefly. I should have said this earlier. The pocket clip works really, really well. There's a little bit of a lip there that you can see, which does help it go into pocket, but doesn't seem to cause any issues, and certainly doesn't create an ergonomic issue. It sort of lands right in that fold in your hand there very naturally, so it ends up not being a hotspot. Now, I imagine some people with a certain hand size, if 100 people tried this, probably one of them would find that they can feel this in their hand. But for me, just the way everything lands is perfect. All right, so very few complaints about this, a lot of good to say. This is not going to be your hard use, heavy duty folder, and I don't think it needs to be. It is a little bit beefier. It's called the Thug, and it definitely has that look. But in terms of finish and really even sort of design purpose and characteristic, that isn't really what this is trying to do. The one other note that I want to make here, because I really love this detail, is the way that they have milled out the titanium and the way that they've done the relief cut here. I think that's a nice way to do it. Again, is this the strongest possible relief cut you could do? No, but it does fit the design fairly well and just kind of breaks things up a little bit. So yeah, overall, absolutely well done on all points, with those very minor complaints that I shared with you. I do want to throw in a couple of size comparisons and even perhaps alternatives. So if you're in this size range is kind of what you look for. The other knife that I find reminded me of this, and I know it doesn't make sense, but they're similar in size and they kind of feel I don't know, they have a similar feel in hand, you know, sort of a stocky but short, very capable folder. And both of these give me a lot of satisfaction. So I thought the Manix and some variation of the Manix might be a good alternative if you like this style of knife but you don't want to spend that kind of money. Of course, there is the original Thug, which is much smaller. Cold Steel Code 4. The Code 4 is an obvious comparison to any, you know, higher end titanium frame lock type of knife because it has that look to it. It's not titanium, it's aluminum, but nonetheless, it has that look, and it offers, you know, a very capable folder, but in a fairly classy looking package. All right, clearly this is bigger, but it might be something to think about if the Thug is a little beyond your comfort zone. I will throw a Para 2 in here, not because these are necessarily super comparable knives, but just because everyone's familiar with the Para 2. So this is really more of a size comparison than a competitive option. And then, of course, when we're talking about titanium frame locks, excuse me, sort of becomes necessary to throw in the Sebenza. This, of course, is the Inkosi, but you know, kind of a standard bearer when it comes to titanium frame locks, and you know, different but also similar here. Okay, and of course, you know, these are both knives that I absolutely love. I like the little details on each one. The Chris Reeve is going to have more longevity, a little more toughly built, and I guess that would be the only thing about the Thug that is a pretty common issue for sort of modern titanium frame locks, is that, you know, they often use sort of this tough overbuilt aesthetic, but when it comes to the hardware and the internals, the tough overbuilt is purely an aesthetic feature, not so much into the carrying over into the components, where on the Chris Reeve knives, not only, you know, this actually looks a little more svelte and doesn't look as heavy duty, but the components are very overbuilt. All right, so wrapping this up, this would go on the very short list of the nicest things that We Knives has done. You know, they've got a number of great models out there, but here's what I find about We. They come up with a ton of models, and their in-house designs often leave me a little cold. But when they combine with a really good designer, that's when they really shine, and this is one of those examples. All right, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check those channel sponsors. It does make a big difference for the channel. We will talk to you soon.